Well, hello and welcome to our third Beyond the Headlines. I'm Nick Masuda. You've seen me a couple times by now. This time I got a little less hair. Decided to go ahead and give it a early summer buzz. Obviously my picture notwithstanding, I kind of fool everybody with this look. Anyways, today I'm very excited to be joined by two of our newest reporters, but both who have made a tremendous impact as soon as they hit the ground. They definitely hit the ground running. It's what we believe in doing here. The old adage of throwing people into the deep end and see if they can swim. They've definitely both shown that they definitely can swim and then some. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Demi, why don't you tell people where you're from, why you landed here, and what has excited you so far?
Awesome. Well, hi guys. My name is Demi Lawrence. I am the Georgetown County reporter for the Post and Courier Myrtle Beach. I'm originally from Indianapolis, Indiana. I attended Ball State University and just graduated in December of 2020. And what brought me down here was just really the Post and Courier name. I mean, even up in Indiana, I'd been an incredibly huge fan of the work that this paper had done, especially at the expansion markets as well, like Myrtle Beach. And kind of what I've experienced so far is, I think Georgetown County is an incredible community with a lot of good stories to tell and a lot of stories that unfortunately have gone untold. So I've been really excited so far to be able to talk to community members, really tell the stories that matter, kind of the deeper stories of, well, what does that mean? Why does that matter? Something that I'm very passionate about and I hope to continue to do in the coming months in this position.
Great. Alex, same kind of teeing it up for you there too. Why don't you give people, you've been here for like all 3 seconds. So why don't you let people know what you're all about?
Yeah, so again, my name is Alex, and I cover Horry County government. So I just moved here. This is, I think, my fourth week because I've just been here pretty soon. I moved here from Idaho, but I'm originally from Miami, Florida. So I've kind of lived everywhere. I've also lived in Arizona and a few other states. But I kind of came out here, honestly, because I was really excited to cover government in this area. I think that Horry County has a really interesting government along with county and the Myrtle Beach area, Conway, and then all the other smaller kind of governments in between that. And I think it's really interesting how many different governments are functioning within one county and the different reaches that each one of them have and how they interact in positive and in, sometimes negative ways. And just kind of looking at that. So I was honestly just really excited to cover government at such a young age. I just graduated close to a year now ago. So being able to kind of jump in and cover something as crazy as government is really what's made me really passionate about the job. And yeah, again, with what Demi said, I think telling stories about underserved communities and untold stories that haven't always taken notice or taken kind of the first opportunity is something I'm also really passionate about. So.
Absolutely. And, just for the audience to know, you guys are two of the best to come out of school over the last year. And so to be able to get you guys out here to South Carolina, where obviously we're in the middle of the second fastest growing area in the country, which definitely makes it unique. And the opportunity for you guys to impact how it does grow through your reporting is pretty exciting. Some housekeeping things. So obviously a few folks sent some questions in ahead of time. You guys can use the chat feature or the Q&A feature, I should say, to send in questions. We'll address those towards the end unless I see one that really is relevant in the moment. We encourage it. We want this to be as interactive as possible. So please do that. If we run over time, understand that this is all recorded. It will be up on our website. We will push that on social and it'll also be sent to you via email. So if you can stick with us past that 30 minutes, great. If you need to bounce at 30 minutes, we totally understand that too, respect the time. Just sometimes when journalists start talking about what they do day in and day out, it gets pretty passionate and we lose track of time. So it's not a bad problem, but we do want to make sure that you understand that you will get everything in full via email, also with a couple links that I'm sure you guys will want to check out. So Demi, let me start with you. You've been here for 4.5 months or so, but recently you really you really found a story in Spring Gully in Georgetown. And really it was through your reporting that they found out some funds were being sent elsewhere when really Spring Gully needed some help. So talk to me about that story, how that went, how you found that, and ultimately what the result was.
Yeah, so I'll try to keep it, because there's a lot to it. I'll try to keep it a little bit condensed and simple. So basically, I attended a county council meeting and I learned about a 2014 capital project sales tax. I really didn't know a whole lot about it. I really just reported that it was being moved on to a third reading, I think. Next thing I knew, the next county meeting two weeks later, 11 people from the Spring Gully community, an unincorporated area just outside Georgetown city limits, came and told stories of their homes flooding, having to wear, boots out to just go simply get their mail even after a very light rainfall. And that actually pushed the reading back. It pushed the vote back to allocate this capital sales project, these funds, because they needed to reevaluate. And so I felt that that was really interesting. And I just reached out to these community members. I think I found them on Facebook. And I really just said, hey, I'd love to hear your story about this. And we got to chatting. I learned a little bit more about Spring Gully, a predominantly Black community, unincorporated, just as, like I said, outside of city limits. And they've been having flooding issues for a very, very long time, they said. And, I was hearing things about like floorboards and homes needing replaced every few years or so and not really be able to do a whole lot, like having to go to Home Depot to get water pumps for your den. And as someone from the north who's never dealt with anything besides flash flooding, this was an opportunity for me to learn, but also just to see these people do what I think we all wish we could do, and is stand up and say, hey, this is not right. We need to be addressed. And so in the middle of that as well, I also found this current year's budget for the county as well as last year's budget for the county, and found that the last 2 years, the stormwater fund had been slashed significantly. Actually, this year, from last year to this year, had been cut by almost 60%. So in tandem with the Spring Gully story about them meeting with their county council member to request and figure out how to allocate this $1 million that was being allocated originally fully for the library, in the midst of that, I also found that stormwater budget story. And so kind of combining those together, what happened most recently was county council allotted $300,000 for Spring Gully community and $700,000 to library improvements, when there already was a specific fund within that capital project sales tax to go towards the library. A lot of the folks in Spring Gully community who have lived there for a very long time, it's generational, had told me that 300,000 was good, but that it may not even be enough to conduct a study, let alone make some infrastructure improvements. So I know that these community members now, and something that I'm waiting to get some news about on when a meeting is going to be, I know that the Waccamaw Regional Council of Governments, in tandem with each community within the county, is going to be sending out some block grants to the state to try to get some funding. Those applications are due next week. They're supposed to be having a public hearing sometime soon with the community about that. And Spring Gully is trying to apply for more funding through this block grant to fix the things in their community, because many of them believe that while, like I said, the 300,000 is a good start, it simply is just not enough to fix all of their issues. So that's kind of where we're at now, is we're waiting to hear when that public hearing is going to happen through the Council of Governments. People around here call it the COG. So that's kind of where we're at right now with that story.
Talk to me a bit about how important that community involvement is in terms of sourcing and getting to know people, beyond just listening to them at a meeting, how important that was in terms of finding these other things, and how much news you were actually breaking to them during this process too. I know the Stormwater Fund was something they really weren't aware of.
Yeah, one of my main sources, I still talk to him a lot. Even, when I was in the midst of the story, I was talking to him, I think, every other day. Even if it wasn't about the story, just kind of asking him, what do you have for me? Do you have any questions? Like, here, I can give you this, something like that. Just building relationships, kind of going on that for a second. The whole point of why I love being a journalist is because I get to work with everyday people, working with elected officials. Great. I love that. I really love working with people. And so this was my first opportunity. I was able to do that here at the Post and Courier Myrtle Beach, was work with these community members in Spring Gully. Going along with that, a lot of the community members did not know about the Stormwater Fund. And they used that in 2 meetings that they had with their county council member to try to decide, okay, how do we want to allocate these funds? What do we need to do? They told their county council member that. They're like, hey, here's the story from the Post and Courier Myrtle Beach, and here's the budget. You guys cut our the stormwater fund. So what gives? And that community involvement is so important because, it's unfortunate sometimes that you have to say all of these things and do all of these things to make something action happen. Sometimes it's easy to think like, oh, it'll just happen or things will, be taken care of. Unfortunately, sometimes in the world we live in, you really have to stand up, take a stand, be firm, be firm like a tree and just root it down and be like, no, these issues need to be addressed. And that's really what this community did here, but has been doing for a while. They've had a community action group on Facebook for a little over a year. Of course, the pandemic kind of stopped a little bit, but this community really is kind of just fed up at this point. And it's been interesting to kind of see the relationships between county council members, because I do think there are some county council members, if not all of them, that do really, really care about this issue, not only the flooding, but the Spring Valley community. And I think it's kind of just a thing of like, okay, how are we going to fix this through, a government level? Because we all know government can get kind of messy. How do we fix this, technically, but how do we make sure that something like this doesn't happen in the future and that these things aren't just quick fixes? Because that's something that a lot of the residents were worried about as well, was they didn't want quick fixes. They wanted structural changes that could last and, have the integrity to last for several decades.
Right. So Alex, you were here for about a week before you found a story with a bit of controversy, and it was quite the exciting day. I think you were traveling around in a car quite a bit. Break that day down for people, what it meant, and actually, one of your project you were already working on, and how that kind of led to you being able to get some answers that maybe nobody else was able to get.
Yeah. So the story that Nick is referring to, for those who don't know, is Council Chairman for Horry County, Johnny Gardner, came under controversy for having some ethics violations against him, particularly for pretty much not filing things the way that they were supposed to be filed, and then also having loans above kind of like unknown loans that were kind of during his campaign process and then after, along with campaign donations that exceeded. South Carolina state law says that donations can only be about $1,000. If they go over that, that's technically not correct and not ethical. And he received some campaign donations to the sum, one of them close to $9,000, along with some others that went less drastically over. So I got a tip about the news, saw some like smaller chats kind of channeling about it. So the night that I saw that, it was late into the night, and I was like, okay, well, there's not much I can find out at 10 p.m. So I sent out some emails that went out first thing in the morning that night to the State Ethics Commission, asking about the records. And I quickly got the records within a couple hours of asking them for them, which is not normally always the case. But I got the records, which proved the points that I was kind of hearing and that were circulating. The kind of points that Mr. Gardner will have to appear for a hearing in August in Columbia in regards for these ethics violations. So then pretty much I had to buckle down and try to understand it all, because I hadn't been covering all of this very specifically just yet. So I had to kind of look through South Carolina state laws and understand the violations, reach out to some of our investigative reporters and talk to them about how this process works, especially those who have been dealing with these kind of issues all across the state, especially with our Uncovered project. And then I kind of, I had to also reach out to Mr. Gardner. One thing that I'm working on currently is a profile series for all of the council members for Horry County. And there are, I believe, 12 of them. It could be 11. I might get that wrong. And I've been reaching out to all of them. So I actually had already at that point interviewed Mr. Gardner, just, talking to him about his, role as chairman, a little bit about himself and his life. So we kind of already established a relationship. And I think that's really important, that, we have a professional relationship. He knows how to reach me. I know how to reach him. I have context for what he's been doing, what he cares about as a council member, but also I understand, the things that the community might feel that he needs to be more forward on, and the kind of issues that he's still working under. So I'd already kind of had some establishment of contact. So on that day, I kind of got my story together and was like, okay, I've got everything I need to publish the story other than a comment from Mr. Gardner. And I wanted to get that last, of course, because I wanted to get everything understood before I reached out to him. And so I reached out to him and I hadn't heard from him. So I kind of took it upon myself to drive out to Conway, to his office to try to find him. He wasn't in, so I didn't get a chance to speak with him. I drove out to his personal office along with his professional office for county government, and didn't get him, but I did everything I could to make sure we could get a comment when we first published the story. And then within an hour of getting home, I actually received a phone call back from him with the comment and kind of some more information on, that he felt that it was just kind of a, clerical error, and he was working to figure things out, and he's, ready to accept the challenges of it and just kind of working on it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think the reason why I wanted you to share that is it's so important to understand that we do as a group make sure that we make that extra effort, even when a story potentially is negative for somebody, whether it's a governmental agency, an individual. It's super important for us to always get their side. Doesn't always happen. It does. You provide the opportunity, and sometimes people choose not to take it, or an agency chooses not to take it. But as soon as Mr. Gardner got that stuff back to us, it was immediately inserted, story adjusted, put back out there on Twitter and on Facebook to make sure people understood that we did have comment from him. And it'll be interesting how that plays out with him. So, I think that, speaking of how things play out, Demi, I'm going to kick it back to you. Next week we've got an election in Georgia, an unexpected one, obviously due to a death. But it's been an interesting campaign for both of them. So kind of talk to me about what you've learned about both individuals so far, and what you're looking forward to with your first election night with the Post and Courier. Actually, I think in general, I think it's your first election night in an important race that's had some interesting twists to it.
Yeah, for sure. I will preface by saying this is my first time covering, besides just going out to election polls and talking to people, actually talking to the candidates. It's my first time doing this. And it's something that I've been so excited to do. And I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to do it, especially for a special election, because those just come with a medley of other different things that don't happen during a general election. So for Georgetown City Council, Council Member Rudolph Bradley passed in November, I believe, November 2020. And so this election with Republican candidate Jonathan Ankner and Democratic candidate Ronald McInnes will be happening next week, next Tuesday. So if you're Georgetown city limits, just let you know, it's next Tuesday, go out and vote. So it's for City Council for that seat. Both candidates I've talked to multiple times on the phone for multiple stories, both very nice, have really communicated with me well, and I very much appreciate their discretion. Elected officials or candidates working with journalists is so important. So I want to say I appreciate their cooperation at this point. Jonathan Ankner is taking a bit more of an economic approach, which is what we see with a lot of Republican candidates wanting to, bring economic reform. Some things he's found with City Council of what he says is that the same issues have been talked about for decades, and he personally hasn't seen any progress. So he's hoping to bring some economic progress to the city, while Democratic candidate Ronald McInnes is looking to have some more youth reform. He's really looking to invest in the youth and the community, things like that. Ronald's background is very interesting because he's a pastor, but a lot of his drive, motivation, and things like that come from when he was actually in prison for, I think, 13 years for drug trafficking charge, I think. I did a story on that. You can go read that. But he talked to me a lot about, how that taught him a lot and how that's a big part of his story, personally. And then I think it was 2 weeks ago, we got hold of a mailer that was going out by a group that to this day, I still don't know who it is, who it's owned by, who paid for it, nothing. Accusing McInnes of being for trans rights for children. We've heard that a lot in the news lately with several state laws around the country coming in, trying to, I guess, bar or not allow children who are transgender to compete in the same sports, things like that. So that mailer was going around, and I called both candidates up and kind of asked them, what's going on with this. Ankner told me that he was not behind it and he had never seen it before. McInnes actually denied the allegations and said that he was not for what the mailer was accusing him of, which was allowing transgender children to use bathrooms that matched their gender identity. So it was kind of a he said, she said thing. Those things in journalism can be really difficult to report on because facts are so important, but there's really no facts there when you don't know who paid for it. I had to talk to our investigative reporter, kind of like Alex was saying, and be like, what does this mean? What was this? Like, how do I go about finding out who this was? And so he helped me a lot. And then now, coming up next week is the election. I feel like I've done a great job of making sure that our readers know what each candidate is for, what they want to focus on, and the plans that they have for the city of Georgetown once they come to council. And I think that the readers now are very informed. And if they have any questions about the election or how our coverage will continue and whoever is elected, how they will be held accountable for the things that they promised they would do, feel free to reach out to me, email me. We can talk about that a little bit more. But yeah, it's been a very interesting election to cover. And I'm excited to continue to cover it as the results come in next week and things continue to progress.
Awesome. Yeah, I think that, anytime that you deal with something that is controversial, like the transgender flyer, there you found fact in the fact that you actually engage with both candidates to really get where you found a way to, at least if people were getting this mailer in the mail, you found a way to actually give people the truth on how each candidate stood on it. I think ultimately, yes, we do need to find out who's behind it. And you know what, we might never find out. But at the same time, you were able to provide transparency to readers, which is super important. So a quick, again, housekeeping thing. If you guys have questions, please do drop them in the Q&A section. We will address those probably in about 6 or 7 minutes. As I said, once we get talking, we've gotten like three questions here, and we're 21 minutes in. So Alex, speaking of elections, you've got a pretty big one coming in at the end of this year with the mayor of Myrtle Beach. You've gotten to know Brenda a little bit, the current mayor. Yesterday, you met another candidate, and we've got one more to go, former Trump photographer. Talk to me about how exciting that is for you. I know you really love covering government, but the mayor of Myrtle Beach is a pretty big deal. So talk to me about your excitement behind that and how you want to approach it.
Yeah. So, like Nick said, I've covered Brenda Bethune, the current mayor, who is also planning to run for a re-election. She had a campaign kind of announcement party last week. Everything's blending together, so excuse me if I get my dates wrong. And I also got to speak with Tammy Durant. I had spoken with her on the phone before, but we hadn't met in person. But then she was actually at a mural kind of exhibition and unveiling yesterday within Myrtle Beach's downtown area. So I got to actually meet her in person and talk to her a little bit more about, her involvement within the community. So yeah, no, I'm really excited to cover elections. I have been a part of an election coverage night when I worked. In school I covered elections, and then also I had an internship with the Arizona Republic, and we actually I got to see how the 2020 presidential election rolled out in a major news organization. I didn't have much of a role other than editing stories that night, but I got to kind of see the stories that were being written and just kind of get a better understanding of all the things that can happen on election night. So that was a really amazing opportunity. I'm really excited to kind of be the lead on an issue though, and not so much just kind of doing the one small step, which it's an important step, but I'm excited to be able to kind of really deep dive into each issue, get to know each candidate, and kind of getting to know what each of them care about. I think, the Q&A series that Demi did with her two kind of members for her election, I think is a great approach to kind of getting to know the candidates and letting them kind of tell you, what they care about on the issues. I think for Myrtle Beach, probably, I think a few different things I think we should, look into. I plan to hopefully do some profiles in each of the, chairmans and some, the mayor candidates, and kind of, deep dive and look into the things they care about, what the people that around them say about them, how people are feeling, and then, cover things as we go through the election cycle and we get a better understanding of, who's really in the lead. Obviously, we have the incumbent, Brenda, obviously the current mayor, and there's a strong support for her at the moment, with plenty of people in attendance at her campaign kind of opening. But we also have, Tammy, and then Jean Ho, who is a former campaign photographer for former President Donald Trump. So I think it's a really interesting race, and we've got a wide plethora of people who have all very different things that they care about. And I think it's along with, getting to know them and the issues they care about, I think for each one of them, there's going to be a core kind of thing that maybe we should focus on highlighting as well. I know especially for Ms. Durant, she really cares specifically about Myrtle Beach's crime and the homeless issues that are happening in Myrtle Beach. So I think that's something that we as the Post and Courier should deep dive into as well, so we have a better understanding of those issues in relation to her campaign, and can I kind of understand the issues that they're talking about from a non-mayoral perspective, and just kind of looking at the issues as a face-on kind of thing. So I plan to kind of look into all the issues as well as they're thinking about. Got a few months before that's happening, but I definitely am, starting the reaching out process now and getting to know things as they happen. And obviously, if there are any like campaign speeches or events or anything like that as well. So, yeah.
Very cool. To walk into a mayor's race like that is a big deal, especially with the impact that it has on tourism and working with the chambers of the world. That role is very important. Brenda's obviously, in her first term and has had to deal with a pandemic, which is something obviously we'll dive into over the next few months. So Demi, I'm now going to have to put you both on the clock for 60 seconds or less. And that's great. Nothing wrong with that. You kind of got started in Georgetown with the school district. And that was by design because there were some issues that were honestly low hanging fruit in terms of kids returning to school or not returning to school. Talk to me about how that helped you get a better picture of what Georgetown was from a diversity angle, from kind of the gamut. How did that help you?
I think that education and students, our children, our children are the base level of things that we care about as a community, whether or not you're like me, who's young and doesn't even want to think about having children, things like that. Like education is a very base level thing for a lot of us. And so I think a lot of things span out from it, a lot of stories, a lot of issues. And it was really helpful for that. But it also was helpful that all of the board members so far have been incredibly welcoming of me, have helped me, have talked to me a little bit. Superintendent Price has also been very responsive to my emails as well. And honestly, given me more story ideas. I told them, hey, I'm new, I want to cover this county well. And they've given me story ideas, as well as community members who noticed, hey, this reporter is covering our schools now, maybe I can reach out to her and talk to her about some story ideas. So it really is kind of a base level thing that a lot of things web out from: education, our students, our children. But I think a lot of people don't realize. And so that kind of is how that worked. Nothing's
more important than children. There's nothing more emotional than either. So Alex, for you, 60 seconds or less, buck sport.
Yes.
Obviously, probably not as well known of a community as it should be in Horry County, but a very important one for a multitude of reasons. Talk to me about, I know you're starting to do some work there and we've got long-term plans in terms of really diving deeper into that community. Talk to me about why it's so important.
Yeah, so Bucksport, for those that don't know, is a predominantly Black community, right around kind of the Waccamaw and PD River, they're kind of getting hit by both, and they're having some major issues when it comes to flooding. They have issues with their ditch systems, with their drainage systems, with houses just not, being above, not the correct elevation, but so much that they're hitting constant water, and water is just kind of at a standstill when they have flooding there. And that community is really important because they have a historical background as a Black community, which is not always something that we think about. And, it's not an unknown fact that minority communities are underserved and have been underserved by newspapers in the past. So remembering that, they need our voice just as much as anybody else. And, there's just so many people there and they have such a strong community, especially a community leader. Kevin Mishu has been someone I've been working with a lot. And he is such a big advocate for their community. And it's just, this community is very interesting because they have no interest in leaving. They're proud of their community. They're proud of where they're from, and they want to make it the best home it possibly can be. So they're fighting, to make sure that flooding is addressed in their community. And, I'm fighting to make sure that we're covering it fairly and equitably, and they're given, the voice that they deserve to have.
Absolutely. And I think that you mentioned something very important there. We have Horry County on one side that actually likens itself to being the quote unquote independent republic and are very proud of being here and want to see it kind of stay the same. And yet you got all this growth, which is obviously going to change the area in some ways. Then you have Georgetown on the polar opposite where, they have found a way to succeed through their own direction. And they don't change for much, but they know what they stand for. But both have obviously communities that are highly underserved, not just by us, but also by governmental agencies and ignored. And so I think that from me, I think it's important for our audience to understand is that we'll always be fair, but we are going to ask the tough questions. We are going to tackle the tough stories. That doesn't always make us the favorite person in the room, and we understand that. but it is something that we take a lot of pride in terms of making sure that when a situation like Bucksport or Spring Gully pops up, it's something that we're not going to shy away from because we have to ask tough questions. It's just not how we're built, and that's not what journalism's about. Journalism's about getting truth and getting facts, and I know so many people in the world can make up their own facts and believe what they want to believe, but what we're super passionate about at the Post and Courier across the entire state is that we're always going to give you the truth. Sometimes you might not like the truth, but we're always going to give it to you. And I'm super proud of the work you guys have done. It looks like right now nobody has popped in a question, which means you guys answered a ton of them while you're talking, so that's fantastic. I think the biggest thing here that I want to encourage everybody who's listening in, who watches this later, whether it's on YouTube or our website or the email that you're going to get sent, is that we would love to have you as a newsletter subscriber. And it's easily accessible on our website at postandcourier.com/Myrtle Beach /newsletter sign up, I believe. But you'll find it at the bottom of our page, and you can easily sign up for, we have 5 different newsletters right now. We haven't launched the education one quite yet, but between myself and Demi, we will be doing that very shortly. We have a great audience on our overall. We keep you informed 4 to 5 days a week on that list. And we have minor lists like business, and that we do once a week. And we have a sports one on Sundays. So whatever your need is, we can serve you. And then obviously, ultimately, we're always about, we want to make sure that we're providing quality journalism. And to do that, we need the support of the community. And so as a subscriber, we're not dirt cheap, but because we fully believe that you have to invest in the community, and that costs some money, in order to provide people with that truth, with the reliability, with the consistency, and to have talent like Demi and Alex, it absolutely takes investment from everybody involved beyond our company, but also the community. And so if you feel up to it, we would love to get you in there. We've got some great deals going on right now, and I can't ever guarantee that those are going to last. So make sure you get in there. Again, you can find that on our website at postandcourier.com/Myrtle Beach /subscribe. We would love to have you as a subscriber. We do feed you an awful lot of content, between 40 and 50 stories every week. That's growing by the day as people like Alex and Demi get to know the community more and more. The amount of content that we have will overflow, and it's great to see it. I was here when we launched this thing in August to see where we are now. It's been an incredible growth. We appreciate the community supporting us, but we're only getting started. We're just touching the tip of the iceberg. I know it's very cliche, but we feel like we have found a voice, and now we're just going to make sure we shout it from the mountaintops. So again, thank you guys for tuning in today. A little bit past a half an hour. We appreciate it. Again, please do, if you can, we'd love to see you as a subscriber. If not, please do sign up for our newsletter so you can get a glimpse as to the content that we're producing day in and day out. And I'm pretty sure we can convince you that being a subscriber is well worth the investment. So if you guys have any questions, do feel free to reach out to me, to Demi, to Alex. They're both very active on Twitter, so make sure you follow them there. And I am sure they will love to engage with you. Until our next episode, see you guys later.